Good morning, guys. 8:31. We are live. Dave Kittle is going to join me in a minute. But on the line, I've got Daniel Hirsch. I'm going to bring him on in just a second. He is a DPT who made the transition. I don't know anything about this story, but I'm dying to hear it. Made the transition into compliance. He has a company. I found him on LinkedIn, Risk and Compliance Analytics. So let me grab Daniel. All right, awesome. Daniel, thank you so much. For anybody watching, this was like a last minute deal. He messaged me last night, said he could join. So here we are. Let's start right out of the gate. Your name has DPT after it, but you're in compliance. Dave, welcome. I want to get Daniel's story real quick. So how did you make that transition?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey, Dave, good morning. I know everyone on the East Coast is getting going. So I made the transition just by dumb luck. I think that was I think that's kind of how a lot of therapists, you find how they get into specialty areas, and it's just either experience or just randomness. For me, my first career was in property and casualty insurance. So it was really insuring businesses. I loved doing it. I loved how creative you had to be and how you had to learn about all these different businesses. And for the transition going back to as an older adult, going back to getting my DPT, and then having a great opportunity to serve as a compliance officer for companies has been incredibly valuable. And I've mentioned this to other people. It's very unique. It's a very small subspecialty. There's not a lot of us that do this, and even fewer that actually say, "Hey, we got to be aggressive. We can't just sit back and wait for things to happen."
I love a proactive approach. You know, I've been connected to Nancy Beckley for years, probably close to a decade now. She's an amazing resource, but unfortunately she retired. She's trying to kind of move out of the profession, although you would never know it because she's helping everybody out. I heard little bits and pieces. So I want you to kind of explain your business model to me, because I recently shared on social media. You know, I'm a private practice owner. I own 2 locations. At our largest, we had 5 locations, but I started with one little 800 square foot space. And I know we're getting to the point, margins are compressed, salaries are high, expenses are going up. I can't afford a dedicated compliance officer. I can't afford an attorney. I can't afford all of these other things. And it's really to the point where I can't afford to be a therapist because everyone has a hand in my pocket. Now you have kind of a different model for how you're running the business. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my business model is very different. We started out by saying we need to change the perspective. People have just been for too many years, for too long, have had this, oh my gosh, it's compliance. Oh my gosh, I can't talk to you. Oh my gosh, I can't even express what my concern is in the event of getting the wrong answer. That's not the way to approach compliance. It has to be something where it's useful, it's helpful, and it gives you multiple avenues to actually operationally be successful. It can't just be not recommended, the same old, right? The nonsense that we always hear. So my business model was drastically drive down costs, to say, hey, by the way, to prevent legal fees, to prevent all this other nonsense of recreating the wheel over and over again. If I had to recreate the wheel, that means other people who just don't have the time to do it are doing the same exact thing. They're going, searching online, looking for the same content. And by the way, quoting blogs for your compliance, for how you operate, is just not a good strategy. And that's what we saw. We saw this loop of content that was constantly being created and quoted as gospel. And we're like, that can't be good enough. That can't be what we need. So we created everything any practice owner would need in a box for compliance. So it could be a la carte if you want something that's more unique to yourself, if you have additional lines of service. So we have a full store, full service for compliance, and it's a fraction of the cost. Even just membership, for instance, I'll just say it's $200 a year, and you get an entire resource library of tools and really great things that in the past you would pay an arm and a leg just to have counsel or somebody create this content. So the idea is that we really wanted people to stop saying, I can't afford it. Anthony, I can't afford to actually have stuff to use. And that's the motto. That is not about our revenue. It's really about making sure that when we read the next headline, it is not going to be a therapist owner that didn't have the tools or the resources to actually be compliant.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at the website. I just shared the link. Become a member today, $199, get access to clinical resources, front desk, operations, practice resource, therapy, graduate reference. I mean, it's a ton of stuff, updated regularly. I love it. Dave, I know you guys already did a full episode. I don't want to duplicate anything you've done. If anybody watching, go to the Dave Kittle show, go watch the episode. These guys talked about some great stuff. My goal for today, and we only have you for 30 minutes, I wanted to talk about kind of this spread of AI documentation and the approach that I've been taking to it. And full disclosure for anybody watching, I am working with HippoScribe. HippoScribe is one of many documentation services that's new on the market. It's an amazing resource. But what I see happening, and I see it in all the ads, is they're all claiming the same thing. They're all saying, notes done for you. We'll listen to your conversation and we'll write the note for you. And that just seems crazy to me. Like, we're professionals, we're responsible, we have the liability. I don't even rely on ChatGPT to write a social media post for me. And you think I'm going to rely on ChatGPT to listen to a conversation that probably has all sorts of crazy stuff? Because, you know, we're talking to patients, we're socializing, we're referencing, like, I've got a leaky roof and I'm talking to a patient who's a roofer and I'm asking them questions about how I fix my roof. There is no way I'm going to put my license on the line thinking that this AI is going to write my documentation for me. But I know what it is. I mean, it's clearly marketing. They're trying to touch a pain point. I remember when EMRs came on the market and it was like, oh, this is the savior. Everybody still 20 years later hates their EMR. They just hate it a little bit less. We've become accustomed to it. We've built calluses. So just from a high level, kind of what has been your thought when you see this, the messaging, the marketing, and the idea that AI is going to write your documentation for you?
Yeah, the HCCA conference for it's the largest national compliance conference in the country. They just had it this week, and it's fascinating how everyone's jumping on the AI buzz, right? Yeah. Everyone's claiming that they have AI, and I think it's fantastic. I love it. I love technology. However, the lesson that I've learned over the last 3-4 years is if it's not specific to you, you really have to be cautious. So if it wasn't made for you, then you have to say, well, is this going to be, to your point, do I really want them picking up all that type of conversation? And is it really going to be driving my therapy specific documentation? If the answer is no, and it's just another one of these, hey, allied health, right, nonsense categories, then I'd probably be cautious about it. But I love technology. I'm a big fan of, you know, if you could use something to your advantage to make sure that your skill set is allocated where it should be. Literally last week, Medicare was quoted saying on one of their webinars that, you know, EMRs, to your point, Anthony, that EMRs, they don't like the technology. They don't like the way that it's streamlining a lot of this pre-populated template verbiage in the EMR. And I'm like, yeah, but that's why we all have it, to make it easier. It's the whole point is to generate things that are specific enough that get the job done so we could spend more time in front of the patient. So I'm a big fan.
I would love to hear. Go ahead, Dave.
So Tony posted a video either this week or last week that, and I would love to hear Daniel's feedback on this. So Tony said something like, he doesn't want, well, you just said it, Tony, like you don't want the AI necessarily to be writing your documentation. It is your license and your liability. I agree with that. And then Tony said something like he doesn't want like a bodyguard or something else around the documentation. I disagree with Tony. I want the AI to just write my documentation. I would love for my therapist. Now it's different because Tony's in like a busy office and he said there's multiple conversations going at the same time during like multiple treatment visits. So that would be tough for it to pick up if it was like recording the audio and then transcribing that documentation. For our one-on-one home visits, that would actually work. That would actually be beautiful. And I don't know if Tony knows this. I think we talked about it, but like with Luna, after a therapist does a visit with Luna, I think there's something like you do a phone call and you answer some questions and like that becomes the medical record, like the note, which is pretty cool. Like the therapist doesn't have to like type anything. The next step I think would be some of these AI companies where I'm treating Daniel. there's something, whether it's my laptop, whatever, he agrees to it. It's recording the audio of the whole encounter, the whole visit from start to end for that 50 minutes, 55, 60 minutes, whatever. And then it creates the note from literally from just what I'm doing. Now, of course, I think the challenge is the assessment, which is also what Tony said. The assessment would be like my interpretation, my brain, my clinical skills, and understanding of Daniel's response to the intervention. And I think that would be maybe the sticking point with artificial intelligence and documentation, that I think to where I do agree with Tony is you can't fully take the therapist out of the therapy note. But Daniel, I would love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, you can't take them out, but you can definitely make it as easy and simple as possible. I agree with you, Dave. I think that we should really give therapists a layup. There should not be this whole struggle just to get to the end to score, just to submit a note, to submit your claims, right? It should be as streamlined as possible. And to your point, highlight, there's only a certain number of fields that really, really describe, again, your clinical judgment. A lot of this stuff is, it's just data. You're collecting data. So depending on how that data is transmitted or described in certain fields, you could really streamline that. That's a really great way to save time. But like your clinical assessment, that's something that it takes years to learn, right? So you can't exactly ask AI to write that. However, is that really any different than like residencies or anything like that, where someone else is kind of doing the work for you? You're confirming with your skill set and your expertise saying, yes, I concur, right? This is almost like we need an I concur moment for AI.
Tony, how about that?
I agree. I totally agree.
I love that point.
I do want to go back to Daniel talking about the Medicare guidance that was recent, because I know copy paste was a big issue for a long time and templates and all this stuff. I want to hear more about that conversation. But to Dave's point, there's 1,000% there are use cases, and we're early in the technology. What we need, that's why I'm here, is actual clinicians with actual patient engagements looking for these use cases and figuring it out. Once I started doing this, so I did it the way it was recommended. I hit record, 40-minute evaluation, let the AI record the entire conversation, and then spit out a report. And I thought it was phenomenal. I really did. I was amazed at the quality of what it captured, but it wasn't a finished product by any means. So my issue is in the marketing claims. They're selling a dream that isn't a reality, at least not yet. I do agree. I think AI is far smarter than me, never has a bad day, never has kids in the bed waking me up at night, never has, things, tax liabilities and other stuff that you're thinking about. I still think it's funny. No offense to the people watching. I've posted multiple times. Are you as good of a therapist at a 4 p.m. appointment as you are at a 9 a.m. appointment? And all I get back are responses saying, I'm just as good, I'm just as focused. That's totally ridiculous. Multiple research studies have shown that our cognition declines over the course of a day.
That's why we record this so early in the morning. Go ahead.
That's right. So yeah, there's definitely use cases. We just need to develop how we're going to use it. I talked to Kara, who's an OT, the other day. She was like, I do a lot of lymphedema. My hands are occupied. I rely on the recording feature to record the session so I can go back and I've got a record of my measurements on my other things. So she's extracting that. She talked about home modifications. You're walking through the house, you're taking measurements, you're doing this stuff. The AI recording feature will let you focus on that patient relationship. So you're not, I just posted this on LinkedIn this morning, you're not faced in a laptop for 20% of the treatment. You are actually talking to your patient and then having it recorded, transcribed into a useful format. It's definitely there. I think it's a great recruitment tool. I've seen and talked to therapists who refuse to work for certain employers because of their documentation system. I would buy it, not even use it, but just have it as a marketing tool to recruit therapists who might be interested in using it so that I can get top tier therapists. There's 100 ways that it's going to work. We just need to figure out how we apply it right now. But then we also have the compliance issues of, well, if I'm going to use my cell phone, the term, and Daniel's going to know this better than me, bring your own device. Like that's something I had never heard of before we started talking about this. Privacy protection. Like I was looking at the federal regulations, or I don't know if it's federal, and they were saying how you have to have the ability to wipe your phone clean remotely in case your phone gets stolen or gets lost. There are so many of these elements that none of these marketing companies are talking about when they're like, yeah, we'll do your note for you. No worries. Don't get burned out. All right, Daniel, talk about any of that or the Medicare guidance that you were just watching related to kind of this structured format. I want to hear more about that.
Oh man, that was loaded. Okay, so I think my first thought is I'm still waiting to meet a therapist who said, "Oh my gosh, I love being a therapist and I love the documentation component." Like no one ever says that they went to school for this. They really want to treat people. So I guess
Right.
if people consider, and it's all perspective, if people understand that this is just a tool, that we're catching up, and right now, again, this is a fantastic time to be practicing because the leverage that we have as therapists, we've never really had this type of leverage, in my opinion, that we've had a slight advantage over payers because we have tools available that we know that they're not using right now, right? They're still loading up on, there's unlimited amount of job openings for all these payers, right? To be clinical review reviewers and auditors and all that stuff. They're still manually reviewing these notes. So at the time of this recording, that's, to me, when you have an advantage, you take it. And usually, again, you won't usually hear compliance say that, but you should. Also, when it comes to just your point of, I love the IT questions, the privacy and security concerns from HIPAA. Yes, it is federal, but we even solve for that. We have a IT policy and procedure that's made just for outpatient therapists, which you can go on and just buy it. You don't have to create it. It's something that it would take 40 hours to create on your own. So it's something you could just go on the store, buy it. It's amazing. It's really fantastic. A lot of thought and energy went into it, where we just really wanted people to realize that everything that you're dealing with in the clinic, we've already dealt with, we've already thought of, and we have that solution for you. But again, if you want to do it yourself, that's great. I'm trying to relay that message that you got to focus on things that make a difference. And, if that's figuring out how to interpret policies and procedures and federal regulations, that's oftentimes best for, an attorney or someone else that is able to make that interpretation. But yes, you do. From a remote standpoint, you do actually have to be able to remote swipe those devices. That's actually true.
Yeah. It's just, there's so much. I mean, again, I am still on a paper documentation system. There are certain elements I do online on a secure server with a VPN and all of these things. But for the direction my practice is going, from being as large as it was to it's just, I always say I'm never going to replace an employee. As employees move on, they're not getting replaced. And then when that last employee is there and they say, Tony, I'm done, I'm probably out of clinical care. It's just not going to happen. But that being said, what are some of the blind spots that we can't see? You have a unique perspective. You see things that we don't have exposure to. Clinicians watching this, it's going to be everything from they've been a clinician for 20 years, they're amazing therapists, they want to step out into their own business, to they're already running a business, 3 or 4 locations, and they're trying to, protect themselves. What are some of those blind spots that off the top of your head, we should be looking at?
You know what? That's a great question. I'll go back to your comment about the 8 a.m. or the 4 p.m. therapist.
Yeah.
We all have bias, right? So when it comes to treatment or ourself, we always think, well, we're really good. I was really well trained. I have a great degree. I have all this experience. But the truth is that next patient that walks in is just as unique. Even if you treated 1,000 post-op needs before that, you still have to bring your A game to every single patient that shows up. So I think part of the challenge that, to your point, the concerns that people often don't realize is that they don't know what they don't know, or they're so committed to what they're focused on that they really need a third party to come in. Just any auditor would tell you. That's the beauty of a third party audit, that you're able to bring someone else who has this level of expertise that should say, hey, by the way, I know exactly what you should be doing. Let me compare it to what industry standards are. These are what OSHA standards are. These are what ADA standards are. These are the things that you need to operate your clinic just to be compliant, right? Just to be having a minimum level. And oftentimes people will say, I think I got it because I read a couple things online, or I have some checklists or something like that. So I think that's my biggest concern with owners that kind of give me the, I think I got it response, because they don't necessarily know that, hey, by the way, you really, and you could do this with your own taxes, right? It's tax season.
Yeah.
You could do it yourself 5 times in a row, and someone else could come in and immediately pick it up and go, oh, Anthony, what happened here, right? Immediately, because that's their level of expertise and they know exactly what they're looking for. So I think that's, I guess, just to give the analogy, that's our area of expertise, where we've actually audited departments. So we've audited HR departments, revenue cycle departments, marketing, you name it. We've done that in the clinic. So you could just come in and go, hey, by the way, how does it look? And if you've done it before in the past and you have expertise in this, even if you're doing really great, it's good to get that feedback, to be reassured that, hey, by the way, I don't want to unnecessarily expose myself.
Now, go ahead, Dave.
So really quick, I think if I could give some tips, kind of like how Tony is, some tips for the artificial intelligence companies out there, I think it would be a great idea to speak with someone like Daniel around the compliance side, because these AI companies are just like, oh, we can create this tool and, it documents and it does X, Y, Z. And then, someone like amazingly like Tony is like, hey, listen, like all these marketing, the marketing branding that you're saying, like, it's not going to be that easy, or, it's pie in the sky. And here's how to be a little bit more realistic. These companies should, potentially utilize some of the compliance ideas of Daniel, like go through a checklist, and then interface with Tony, interface with me, interface with owners, and like with the pilot, trials and things in practices, utilize it on the front lines with patients. But then you also do need that compliance component, because otherwise the marketing just looks like, yeah, it's going to, be a cure-all for all documentation and your life's going to be so much better. But then there's so much nuance when you actually are in the trenches, right? These AI companies need to be like boots on the ground in a therapy office, or sitting shoulder to shoulder next to you, Daniel, for the compliance side, or all the above, instead of like they're coding this AI startup, they're raising money, but they haven't even been in a therapy office or on a home visit doing a concierge visit with us. I just wanted to say that as a suggestion, if they're not doing that already, because a lot of people are just like, oh yeah, AI, it's like the next thing and everyone's talking about it. But again, I 100% agree with Tony. Like, it's so easy to say that with your marketing and your messaging. And Tony's recent example of like, hey, this is just a tool. This is not a cure-all. I 100% agree with that. So I'm glad Tony put that out there.
So I'm super curious. I'm sure you deal with the same things that we deal with as physical therapists in a different way. So if I'm a physical therapist, I have an initial evaluation. The patient's probably already reluctant to see me, because the patient knows in their mind, back of their head, they're like, I don't exercise, I don't eat right, I'm overworked, I'm overstressed. Like, the patient's coming in very fearful, very defensive, feeling very guilty, a lot of emotional baggage that is all themselves putting it, on themselves. I remember going to a compliance seminar. I started my practice in 2002. This would have been like 2003, 2004, maybe. Steve Levine, who passed away a long time ago, but he was one of the guys, kind of the big voices in the space, and an attorney that was with him. And they said, once you hire us, we're on your side. Like, we're here to help. We're not judging you. We're not working against you. We're not gonna, and I think a lot of the resistance, and you referred to this a little bit earlier in today's podcast, therapists feel embarrassed. Therapists feel ashamed. Therapists are like, I know this is wrong. I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I don't know what else to do. And they're so self-conscious about that they refuse to go and seek your help out. But the reality is, you're there to help them. Like, no matter how bad it looks. I mean, it's like that show Hoarders, where the person from A&E, the person doesn't want to let you into the house, even though you're there to help them fix the problems. What's been some of your experience with that? Just on a general, no specifics. You don't have to give me a name of the person, but do you find that as a reality, that therapists are just, or healthcare providers are just so embarrassed and ashamed of knowing they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, but not knowing how to resolve it, that they don't want to hire you?
It's very interesting. The time and time again, the most consistent message that I hear is, I wish we spoke earlier.
Sure.
Where it's usually cleanup, right? We're cleaning up a condition or a mess that happened, and they don't realize, hey, by the way, A, it could have been prevented, but let's say you couldn't prevent it, human error. They often don't realize that, hey, by the way, earlier contact, and this is always usually true when it comes to prevention, right? If you just reach out, and it's not ego, I don't think it's anything to do with people being like literally embarrassed, but like just thinking, you know what, I have a doctorate degree, I should be able to figure this out. Or, hey, by the way, I know a friend who was married to somebody who, right? It's usually that, like, let's just fix it somehow, instead of saying, you know what, let's just go to someone that has experience with this. And that's part of the concern, that people really don't understand that this exists. And in the past, maybe it was more too generic, like, hey, I'm compliance for acute, subacute, outpatient, you know, everyone and anything. But now really what we've done is we're just saying it's just for therapists and outpatient. This is all we do. This is all we care about. And this is all we think about. So when people realize that this is, I got your back. And hey, by the way, I'm protecting your license and your practice's license. The communication completely flips. It completely flips to, it's a two-way street then. It's not, there's not this dictation of, hey, by the way, David, you got to do this, you got to do that, and the other. It's, hey, by the way, I'm thinking about opening this line of service. How do I strategize that to make sure that I'm within the boundaries? And that solves all the problems in the world, because you already preemptively prevented all these other mistakes that are very costly, right? It's always harder to clean up stuff. Yeah. So I think that's my biggest takeaway, that people don't really often think about, hey, by the way, I could just simply have a resource that has my back, that will help me expand my business, as opposed to saying, gotcha, right? Nobody wants to hear that.
Well, I know I was embarrassed. I know that I was ashamed. So maybe I'm projecting on everybody else listening, but it is a major feat to overcome that insecurity on the therapist side and be like, I need to bring in professional help. I have no idea what I'm doing. And for you to create a resource like this, I think it's great. And full disclosure for anybody watching, this isn't a paid promotion. We have no affiliate relationship, no financial interest. You were willing to come on, answer questions about this. I just want to get the information out there to the consumer. So we're out of time. Thank you so much. I've got the website up there. What is your preferred social media platform if somebody wants to reach out? LinkedIn, Facebook, what do you prefer?
Yeah, the best way is just on the website. They can just go to the website directly at Risk and Compliance Analytics, and they can just do the contact form. That's usually the best way. And we really, really, I can't stress enough, we pride ourselves on being around the clock for people. So when people are like, in the past, I waited a week, I need something timely, something just happened, I need an answer now. That's really what we pride ourselves on. So we're very responsive.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, especially last second. Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right. So Dave, that's just so powerful. It's so helpful. I really wish we could continue to get more of those kinds of experts on, because I think it would help answer so many people's questions.
Definitely. Quick follow-up. So I think Daniel mentioned something about the EMR companies out there that he's heard of have some issue with AI, right? He said something about that?
Yeah. Medicare basically put out guidance on their frustration with the way EMRs are going and what they ultimately want.
So I'm just trying to, maybe it's an assumption, I'm jumping to conclusions here, but like, do you think that there's some of the EMR companies are maybe threatened, or they have these fixed fields where usually the provider would type into and then go to the next page or whatever, and AI would be like a different submission of that information into an EMR? Or because I've talked to some of these other folks trying these things or seeing the other tools that are out there, and it's like if an AI tool was recording the episode and creating its own note, I've heard of like some manual transition, like copying pasting the note into the medical record. But some of these EMRs are like, there's fields that you have to type into. So it's not just like one open text form to copy the whole note and paste it right into today's date for today's SOAP note for a therapy visit encounter. So do you think that some of these EMR companies are afraid? Maybe they're lagging because they don't have their own internal AI. Are they afraid of AI? Do they not have any incentive to participate in artificial intelligence, or can we chalk this up to like this is just the speed of healthcare, which is like the slowest of all industries to adopt any new technology?
Yes to all of it. I think it's one of those things realistically. And my initial impression was, I said, why wouldn't the EMR companies, they already have the platform, they already have the developers, they're already in that space. Why wouldn't they just develop their own AI? Everybody is kind of built on the same backbone. It's virtually a commoditized service. And I'm talking to 2 EMRs today, specifically about this. And I'm talking to a third company today that I'm super excited to talk to, that is in the space of like out of network billing, insurance verification. They're not an EMR company, but I think they'll add real value to a lot of the therapists that want to provide out of network services. It's a different world. You know, it's like you said, like others have said, it's very compartmentalized. You've got your EMRs, and I know that I've talked to EMR founders in the past, and I'm like, why don't you guys do this? Like, this is what we do. This is what we need. Why don't you change it? No, therapists refuse, you know, that functionality, even when it made things easier. Just the simple fact, like, it's a digital technology. It doesn't cost more to have different screens, different user interfaces. I never understood why the EMR didn't have a Medicare medical record, and then a workers' comp medical record, and then a United Healthcare medical record, so that each one of those was customized to the third-party payer, a self-pay medical record. It's never like that. It's still always one size fits all, which fits nobody. So I love what they're doing. Obviously, we're required, you know, we use them. It's a necessary evil these days. But that being said, I just don't understand that space and that market. But I know every founder that I talk to works as hard as they can to try and bring the best possible product to market.
Got it. Really quick. I want to hear your comment about this cup of coffee. If you guys listened to the last episode, Tony had some thoughts on this paper cup of coffee. I want to come back to it. The out-of-network AI tool, is that, and you don't have to say yes or no, but like, I know a biller who has created a tool. I don't know if it's even AI or not, but it's called maxrepricer.com. Is that the out-of-network cash tool that you've talked about, or it's a different one?
No, this is one. I can't mention the name yet.
Yeah, no problem.
But I'm sure there's a bunch out there, you know, so it should be interesting. It seems like a problem that should have been solved a decade ago. I'm surprised it hasn't yet. So let's see where it's going. Let's talk about the coffee. So context for everybody. Dave was telling me, well, share the story. Tell me why you're drinking out of a paper cup of coffee.
Okay. So couple reasons. One, actually, I think Sturdy McKee or some other colleague said, so we have a newborn at home and we do have a dishwasher, but one of the tips, like, and everyone gives me tips, which is amazing. Thank you, everyone. Keep the tips coming. Keep the new dad, the new parent tips coming. And one was get a bunch of, papers, plastic utensils, disposable plates, cups, all that type of stuff. And then when we were in the hospital recently with the birth of our son, there were some, extra paper cups because we had this private suite. We talked about it on another episode. And so I brought some paper cups home because everything was going to get cleaned and trashed or whatever in the room. So we just took some paper cups home. The reason why we're talking about this is because I never drink out of a paper cup at home. And I realized when I was doing these calls and my other morning calls or whatever, I was like, I never realized it, but the paper cup holds the heat. I don't think about this. The paper cup holds the heat of the coffee longer versus if you use a regular mug, the mug absorbs the heat, so it cools off the coffee faster. It's the coffee in this paper cup at home stays hot longer. When I'm out and about, I don't realize that I'm not thinking about the duration of how long it stays hot or whatever. So long-winded, we're talking about a cup of coffee here. And I thought, Tony, you said something like you had a negative sentiment about this. But then when I said, oh, I'm drinking this because I have extra paper cups here. And by the way, it holds the heat in this longer than the regular mugs I use in the morning. that changed your sentiment, or you had an idea or a thought around it or something? I don't know.
Yeah, it shows the power of marketing, how marketing could change human emotion, could change perspective. So when Dave first told me about the paper cup, and I'm not even like, tree hugger, eco-friendly, crazy activist. But my first response to seeing that was, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's wasting paper cups to drink coffee at home. And Dave, sorry, I won the race. It says world's best dad. So hopefully you come in second. But once you turned the conversation to, oh, there's a reason it holds the heat longer, because I know sucking the heat out of a cup of coffee is killing the flavor and the quality of the coffee. I was like, oh, that makes total sense. Now, where I went from Dave's killing the planet, I went to, oh, Dave's a genius because now he's got a better cup of coffee. So I was so impacted by the fact that one little sentence in there could completely change my emotion, my physiologic response to what I saw you doing, And so that being said, I will say, I would never put fresh coffee into a cold mug. I do heat the mug before I put any coffee into it. Even if it's black coffee, I heat the mug, then I put my coffee in. So now the question is, does a heated mug retain the heat longer than a paper cup?
That's a whole other experiment that would have to be offline maybe. But so you heat it, you put the mug in the microwave, or do you heat it with like boiling water? Like, what do you do?
I've done both. So we've got a Breville espresso machine. If I'm going to do an espresso into like the metal, whatever it's called, I will put boiling water into it, swish it around, dump it out, then put the espresso in there. I usually put my mug into the microwave to preheat it. If I'm going to do an almond milk, froth it, same thing. I put it in there, heat it, then froth it. Then I put my espresso in. It's a little bit of a ritual I've probably been doing. I make mine and my wife's every morning for like 15 years. But yeah, I do put the time in.
You heat the mug for how long? 30 seconds, 10 seconds, a minute? How long?
Depends on the mug. Depends. But generally 30 seconds to a minute if it has any of the almond milk that I'm going to froth, 30 seconds if it's just a blank mug.
So we went from talking about cutting edge artificial intelligence technology to almost a caveman topic of coffee and the heat of coffee, as if we just discovered heat. Where do we go from here today, Tony?
We're going to go to social media, opening doors for anybody who is using it. As much as social media has a negative connotation, as much as people like to talk about watching cat videos, taking pictures of your food, all of those things, I gotta say, like, social media has opened more doors for me that I never would have had opened than anything. My YouTube channel, my Facebook groups. I know you've been the beneficiary of this, but it's completely free other than your time to share your perspectives, to share your ideas. And going back to what we talked about earlier, and I want to hear just kind of a high level experience that you've been having, but I see an issue. I see something that frustrates me or excites me or gives me some sort of emotional response. And I've got the opportunity now to share that idea. And it's going to repel the wrong people, but it's going to attract the right people. And I've met so many amazing people. I've connected with so many amazing people, and literally $100,000 opportunities have opened to me simply because I was willing to write an article, turn on a camera and record, do something to get my perspective out there. And it's not because I'm trying to change somebody else's mind. I'm just like, hey, everything I share is just my own reflections and me trying to kind of figure this out in my head. And so I was watching My First Millions podcast yesterday. It was yesterday's episode. If you want to go watch the first 5 minutes of yesterday's episode, it's a part 2 episode. But he was a investor, and he was saying, what are the greatest opportunities moving forward? He said, if I was a social media influencer in any capacity, large or small audience, I would get equity in a company, because there are people with funding, ridiculous funding, that don't have the influence that you have, don't have the community that you have, you know, and that's where obviously my example with HippoScribe, I made that connection because of social media. I saw a problem with the way this AI documentation is being marketed, being sold, even being, you know, the dream that is being presented. And I was like, hey, I've got a community. This falls into my niche. I think I can add value to the company, but I can also add value for the audience. I can realistically say this is not going to do what it claims that it does, but it is going to have a huge impact, and let's figure out how we can make it better. And so that led to my association with the founder of HippoScribe. Now I'm working directly with him. He's the engineer, and I think we can bring a great product to market. But none of that would have happened without social media. What's been your experience?
Yeah, it's incredible, because you and I have talked about this behind the scenes. I've had so I just put out maybe a week or two ago an episode on diagnostic ultrasound in physical therapy, and I had a company that's doing artificial, and I won't mention the name, and it's so early, like I won't, you know, whatever. But they reach out to me. They're doing some artificial intelligence around diagnostic ultrasound imaging. Now I have no idea what even the product is. But I have some guesses as to it, you know, probably around like landmarking, like if it'll help you with training and education with like the tool. There's actually, sidebar, there's another company and another tool, I forget the name, and it's a diagnostic ultrasound for the heart, and you put it right over the heart, like you put the device right over the heart, and on the imaging, it actually it shows like LV, like left ventricle, and like it'll literally populate which anatomy that you're looking at. Now, if you look at the heart, it's pretty obvious, like the north, south, east, and west, the 4 quadrants. But imagine a physical therapist decreasing the learning curve of artificial intelligence imaging, where you place it on the shoulder, and then it's going to specifically show you, like, you know, here's supraspinatus. You move it a different way. Here's the, you know, here's the proximal long head of the bicep tendon, or any other joint of the, you know, the knee, and it's showing like, here's the ACL versus the PCL or whatever, without the therapist having to accrue the hours, or the doctor or the NP or whoever having to accrue the hours of relearning bony landmarks and soft tissue landmarks and anatomy through looking at the imaging. So it takes time to do that. And this would cut the learning curve for any provider, whether it's musculoskeletal or it's some other, you know, organ or some other soft tissue. So a company like that reached out because I put this video out like a week or two ago about diagnostic ultrasound in physical therapy. I've had other practices, other owners reach out, either looking to partner with us or looking to, you know, sell equity and have us invest or whatever. And they'll email me, they'll call me from the number that I have on the screen or on my YouTube channel or whatever. I could talk forever about it, Tony. It's incredible. And the more we put out, the more opportunities we're going to get. So I know you and I are both proponents of like, hey, other therapists, other colleagues, like, start putting videos out there, and you immediately get folks reaching out to you. And another, like you've done, Tony, is like, you've had companies send you products that are usually fairly expensive, maybe sometimes a couple $100 products. There was a neck decompression traction unit. There was many other products that you've done reviews for. These companies see your reviews, they email you, and they're like, hey, we want to ship you a free device. We would love for you to review it, but maybe, you know, maybe that's required, maybe it's not. I mean, I have other, you know, examples that I can't really talk about as to folks reaching out, but it's resulted in short-term money for me, and then also, you know, long-term opportunities.
Yeah, you know, I've got a robotic lawnmower running in the backyard because I had done a video on a neighbor's robotic lawnmower. A different competitive company saw it, asked me to do an unboxing and review on theirs. They sent it out. And so, you know, you're like, robotic lawnmower, how the heck are you going to tie that into physical therapy? Well, patients have knee replacements. They can't get out there and mow. Is this a reasonable device that they can use during their 4, 6, 12-week recovery? So it is, you know, and there's no strings attached. If I don't like the device, I don't have to give it a positive review. What were you going to say?
I'm just curious if you're comfortable sharing the robotic lawnmower that they sent to you.
Yeah.
What's the price point there?
This one was $600. I think most of the higher ticket items are between $600 and $1,000 from what I've gotten. Like you mentioned, a lumbar traction unit, I think it was like $695. I've gotten offers for some competitive spinning bikes, not Peloton, but other versions of them. So that's kind of the upper end for what I've been doing, but I won't take anything, honestly, that's more expensive because I don't want the commitment. I don't want to be on the hook. I don't want to feel compelled to give a video review that I'm not comfortable with. A company that sends you a $400, $500 device, they don't care about that. That's a drop in the bucket, you know? And so the challenge though, for people listening is, I know what you're thinking. You're like, I'm busy in the clinic. I'm busy in the home. I'm treating patients constantly. I'm working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. How the heck am I supposed to start doing that? And that's where it's like, document, don't create. And when I say document, it's you grab your phone, you record a little blurb, maybe you sit in your car. Everybody else hates car selfie videos, but you do what you have to do. And you just share your perspectives. You know, you're creating gold every single time you interact with a patient. That interaction has so much value all over the world. There are people in other countries who have access to that information that will never be your patient. But if you can't capture those little bits and pieces, you can never help those people. And that's where I started. I was like, I'm not going to be a YouTuber. I'm not going to be Mr. Beast. This isn't going to be a big part of my business, which now it is. It's the majority of my business. But I started with this simple premise that I explain an answer to a question. Hundreds, thousands, probably millions of people have that same question. Why don't I just record my answer to that question and share it publicly? You know, and I know it's uncomfortable when you're not used to it. You're insecure. You're like, oh, what if people, I've almost never.
That's what people are afraid of, Tony. You know this.
I do, but the truth is, when you're genuine, even if you say something wrong, I had somebody the other day kind of criticize one of my replies. I don't care. I gave a genuine response. You know, it was as truthful as I could make it. And the number of negative sentiments I get relative to the positive is like by far overwhelming. And so a lot of us get into there because we want to help people. We feel good when people are like, oh, thank you so much. This is my dopamine rush all the time. And I don't even engage as much as I probably could, but it really needs to be done.
Yeah, well said. And the reason why I was asking you about the price point, I figured it was something, you know, north of $400 or $500. And there's, you know, several or many, or, you know, there's what, hundreds or thousands of physical therapists in the Ohio area where you're at. And there's, you know, dozens of practice owners, and you're the only one that got a free $600 or $650 auto AI, not AI, auto, you know, robot lawnmower.
Right.
Because you put yourself out there, because you made a video about your neighbor's automatic robotic lawnmower. And like you said, sometimes like you'll spend 5 or 10 minutes, you do a video, you throw it on your YouTube. It doesn't take that much time. And then you get that opportunity. Now, when you did that review of your neighbor's robotic lawnmower, you have no idea the downstream effects. Like, you could have had no companies reach out, and then you could have also had like 5 or 10 companies reach out and say that they all want to send you a robotic lawnmower, and for you to, you know, break it down, and you got one reaching out. Right. And that's another reminder. Like, there's some videos that hit, there's some videos that get, you know, a crazy amount of views or a crazy amount of responses or folks reaching out to you about it. And then some that don't. And that's another thing I think maybe holding people back is like, they're afraid of like the criticism. Then they're afraid of, you know, some of these duds and some of these videos or some of these topics that aren't well received, or that turns out like no one else really cares about that topic, but maybe you do, or something like that.
It's like anything there. You don't know what is in the future. You don't know what's coming down the road. You know, you have no idea. And therapists ask me all the time, do you think it's worth it? The return on the investment? I'm like, if you need an immediate return, no, it's not worth it. I started, like, I recorded videos back in the early 2000s on my YouTube channel, unlisted. I've got videos going back to 2011. It's something that I would be doing anyway, even without a return on the investment. And the thing that I love about something like this is, whether it's writing, whether it's podcasting, whether it's video, whatever you're doing, you're developing new skills, and you're just like we do with patients. If a patient wants to improve, they need to go through the pain of improvement. They need to go through the hardship of working on something they're not good at. If I want to roll out this AI documentation, I need to go through the pain of figuring out how this works, building the muscles by making repetitions, and this is the same on social media. It's like, you're going to post into the abyss. Nobody is going to see it. But then eventually you are going to have enough repetitions behind you. You're going to start to find an audience. You're going to start to resonate with people. And they're like, that is exactly what I was thinking. And that's the way it develops. You've been at this a long time. Going back again, you, Rob Vining, you guys are the first ones, I think, to ever interview me. I don't know. That might have been 2006, 2007.
No. 2014 or 15.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, but
I didn't graduate until 2011. So we definitely did not interact.
But and you know what? Now that we just talked about that, we go back to your initial. I remember talking to you. That was the same thing I'm doing right now with AI documentation. It's like, oh, this guy, Dave, he's got this company and it does this thing and it has this functionality. You guys used to call me the MacGyver of PT.
Yes.
And it's because I love to take those things, tinker with them, figure out how they plug into the system. We all have some sort of unique value proposition. Dave, before we wrap up, I've been talking to several practice owners in the last couple of weeks, and they're going to see this and they're going to know I'm talking about them, but they're all dealing with the same frustration right now. They have an amazing business. They have an amazing business model. They are amazing therapists. They grow their team. They finally wrangle one or two staff therapists. They get them on the team, and then they lose all their profit. They cannot maintain a profitable clinic with staff because of several things. The things that they were telling me, which I lived, I know this is the reality. They get a great therapist on board. That therapist doesn't have the same motivation to get completed plans of care. You get one or two visits in or cancellations on the schedule. You lost all your profit margin. The therapist wants to learn new skills, which is amazing. The employer invests in helping that therapist learn those new skills. But you take something like pelvic floor, which there's huge demand, then the therapist gets so busy and they're one-on-one, obviously, but they're not going into a cash market. So they can't afford Medicare reimbursement for a therapist doing pelvic floor. Multiple therapists have reached out to me, really stressed out, struggling. And it makes me want to say, now I don't want to say this, but it makes me want to say, look, this is why I can't grow my practice hiring more clinical staff, because the reimbursement isn't there for the model that I use to deliver the service that I want to deliver. Have you run into more of this lately? What are you seeing in terms of your gauge of the market?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, well, we talked about it a bunch. I mean, that's why more practices are adding, out-of-pocket services. I keep saying it, it's not for everyone. I know there's a lot of markets. There's a lot of people that, want to use their Medicaid or their Medicare. And, the numbers just don't always add up unfortunately, for some of those payers or for some of those populations. It's a challenge. It is what it is. But if you are looking to grow your practice and the margins aren't there, like, something's got to be different. And I think so, Tony, in your situation, I'm sure we could figure out a way. Maybe we do that as a future episode. I'm sure we could figure out some way to review behind the scenes your numbers, or just review, how could it be possible to hire another therapist on the clinical side without your profit eroding, right? So, I mean, whether it's cash pay services or it's some other revenue source for the practice, and maybe your insurance component is the lead generation to get people into your practice, and then it's a high, maybe you raise your prices on the monthly memberships of your fitness and wellness, program that you have people pay per month, or maybe you charge them on a weekly basis. Their car gets charged every 7 days instead of once every 30 days. That's a Alex Hormozy tip where you're charging weekly, and then they see the dollar amount weekly. You can make that number a little bit bigger because they only see that number weekly charged. So like, for example, like $20 a week would be a little bit more accessible to someone, and maybe they stay longer compared to if it was, let's say, $55 a month, right? So $20 a week, they see 20 hit their bank account. That's just another idea. But if the numbers don't make sense and your profit erodes, like something has got to change. Like you either have to have a different service or offering that is out of pocket. Maybe it's runners, it's a run lab. It's got to be something different because your payer contracts are your payer contracts. So I mean, there's not many other options there.
Let me ask you this, because this is a comment that I see on multiple Facebook posts. I don't like this comment. I don't like this perspective. I think it's a level of entitlement that should not exist, but I've seen multiple therapists. Dr. Kano is here. That's the way I say it. Catherine, I know I've known you for a long time. I've always in my head said your last name is Kano. I hope that is correct.
Yeah, I think Kano.
Kano? Okay. Well, she's got an amazing business going herself. But anyway, I've heard therapists say we are doctors of physical therapy. We should not have to do things differently to justify earning 6 figures in income. They feel, and I hate to use this word because I know people don't like it, but there's a sense of entitlement that because I am a doctor of physical therapy, I am entitled to 6 figures without changing anything in the way I deliver my service.
100% amen. I agree to that. That there is the entitlement that just because you come out with X amount of student loan debt, like when my first job, one of my mentors helped me negotiate. He was working somewhere. He helped me kind of get it. My first job, he helped me negotiate like the dollar amount. And I think it was like 72 or 75K or something right out of school, like, which I thought was pretty good. And that was 2011, 2012, something like that. I was looking at it as like, here's the dollar amount that I believe I'm worth or that I could deliver or whatever. But I don't think I ever looked at it as like, here's the dollar amount of compensation I need because of my student loan debt. I think those two things, like, it's about your value and what you're providing and obviously your productivity and how you mesh in the culture with whatever practice. But your student loan debt has literally nothing to do with the compensation that you should be paid.
Neither does your title. Like you look at that person, who has a doctorate degree in music. That doesn't mean that they deserve $500,000 compensation because they went through that program. Let's think of parting shots. Mine is going to be, Catherine said, I thought you were going to say you went to paper cups because you have a newborn and no time to wash dishes.
That too. I thought I said that, but if I didn't, then yes, that's part of it. Yes, of course.
Well, you said, quote, we have a dishwasher. I was dying for you to make a joke about your wife being the dishwasher.
Oh man, no.
that would have been my parting shot. Any thoughts to wrap up today's episode?
Parting shot, going back to the videos, getting yourself out there, putting videos out there. I like Tony's idea. We've talked about it before. Just, you don't even have to, just literally put the video camera, get a patient's consent, interview the patient. Like, hey, like we did this today during your session, your appointment. How did that go? What did you think about it? Or you said, years ago, you tried a different therapy place and now you're with us. Like, without saying the other place, like, can you describe like your experiences at like trying different therapists over the years? Or how did you find me? Like you said, you were referred or you found us on Google or Facebook or whatever. More therapists. If you want more opportunities, if you want more income and opportunities, it could be in the short term, but definitely in the long term, video is the way to go. That's why we do this. We know that opportunities come from literally this episode, but it might not be for 3 to 6 months from now. So therapists, we're continuing to nudge you and provide hopefully some tips and some guidance, but get out there, more video content, and it'll help you. It'll help grow your business. It'll certainly help the profession over time, but it'll definitely help you get out of a challenging situation that you might be in.
That's right. If you guys want something different, do something different, go subscribe to the Dave Kittle Show. Go subscribe to PT Pintcast. We will see you guys next Tuesday at 8:30 a.m.
Hold on. Parting shot for you, no?
That was it. If you want something different, do something different. All right. See you guys.
Thanks, Tony. Bye.